Misdiagnosed and misunderstood. It's a health condition ripe for misinformation, and it's estimated to affect more than 1 million women in Canada. Tonight, we talk PCOS. Welcome to another episode of Big If True. I'm Molly Thomas. Well, if you're a woman of childbearing age, you may have a health condition you don't even know about. It's called polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS. And globally, the WHO estimates that 70% of women with the condition go totally undiagnosed, even though it can drastically impact their physical and mental health. And now, viral, misleading posts on social media are confusing vulnerable women desperate for treatment. Tonight on the program, Nam Kiwanuka joins us to talk about how PCOS is affecting Ontarians in her new podcast. Two experts explore how influencers gain trust and sometimes spread false health info online. And finally, the woman trying to set the health record straight, a leading PCOS authority, joins us all the way from Australia. But first, a deeper look at this frustrating condition. Even if you don't know what it means, you've probably heard of PCOS. Polycystic ovary syndrome is one of the most common hormonal conditions in women. It's estimated to affect somewhere between 6 to 13% of reproductive aged females around the globe. When you break that down in Canada, that's up to 1.2 million women. Symptoms range from irregular periods, weight gain, acne, facial hair and hair loss, and sometimes infertility. What's extra challenging, everyone with PCOS experiences it differently. Some gain weight, some don't. Some lose their hair, others grow more. Many are dismissed by their doctors, which can delay diagnosis and increase long-term health risks like diabetes, heart disease, and even uterine cancer. While there are ways to help manage symptoms, experts have never found a cure. But if you look at TikTok, you might think otherwise.
How did I reverse my PCOS symptoms, including facial hair loss, acne, weight gain? Guess what? It was through weight loss.
I'm going to share 5 things with you that really helped me during my PCOS healing journey.
Last September, the BBC World Service found influencers were selling fake cures for PCOS.
To try all of these things out, which is my amino acids, L-tyrosine, glutamine, L-acetylcysteine, CoQ10, folate.
The claims? The right supplement or diet can cure PCOS. Birth control pills cause the condition in the first place. And while mainstream meds might help manage it, they don't deal with what influencers say is the root cause. Now, none of that is scientifically proven, but on social media, it can be convincing enough to believe. What a difficult landscape for women to navigate. Nam Kiwanuka knows this well. She's the host of TVO's newest podcast, Mistreated, which focuses on how medicine has and still is failing women. Nam, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Molly.
So you did 2 episodes on PCOS, talking to Ontarians.
Yep.
What stood out about their stories?
Oh, Molly, it's the consistent thing that we heard. We had 2 guests. One lives in LA, actor Andrea Lewis. She was on Degrassi, and a researcher in Windsor, and she herself has PCOS.
Okay.
So the common thread was that when they initially were diagnosed with PCOS, they felt like their bodies felt different, but the doctors would dismiss them and say, oh, you're fine.
So a doctor dismissing that
Yeah.
is a huge deal.
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, where do these women go?
Well, everybody goes online. And I also have experience with that because I had fibroids and my doctor was like, you have fibroids. I'm like, well, what does that mean? So you go online, you find a community, and you're like, okay, I understand this condition. But even myself as a journalist, I was following somebody. I was like, yeah, I should take that supplement. That will help my fibroids. And then I was like, no. But that's what happens because you end up finding a community of people who have this similar condition. And one of the things that Andrea said when it comes to PCOS, it's actually considered a lazy girl's diagnosis, which is super insulting.
Yeah.
The assumption is that you're big because you're not working out. You're just being lazy. It's not a big deal. But the researcher said, actually, some people with PCOS are lean, present lean. So if you can lose weight or not, it doesn't mean anything about you having PCOS. Andrea actually said when she was first diagnosed, she felt a lot of shame and embarrassment.
I want to come back to those online communities because in some ways they're really beautiful because people feel like there's some solidarity there. But the other side of it, there is information that is questionable at at the least. So what are you seeing in terms of myths online?
Oh, lots of myths. The first one is if you have PCOS, you can't get pregnant. That's not true. The researcher we spoke to that women with PCOS can become pregnant. The other one is if you can't lose weight or if you gain weight, you have PCOS. That's not true. Again, some women present lean. So if you have PCOS, it doesn't mean it doesn't really have anything to do with your weight.
So what other myths are out there?
I think one of the biggest ones is that you can reverse PCOS symptoms. You can't. There is no cure for PCOS. And right now online, there are a lot of people who are saying you can get rid of it, you can reverse it. The researcher we spoke to said that you can manage it. You can do different things, like you can eat different foods or you can, with your lifestyle.
Let me ask you, I mean, your whole podcast focuses on healthcare failures for women. What would you say to women that are struggling with healthcare advice, feeling dismissed, feeling like the healthcare system is failing them?
You know your body. Like if something feels off, trust yourself. It's really hard to speak up with doctors, like to challenge them. I grew up in a very conservative family. You listen to doctors, you listen to teachers, you listen to authority. But when it comes to your health and a lot of women's conditions, it is dismissed. You have to keep advocating for yourself. It's scary, but your health matters, so speak up.
The PCOS myths we're seeing online are being pushed by powerful influencers, and many look and sound legit. Now, researchers from Western University are tracking how they're so successful at pushing false info. Vanessa Trocchi holds a master's in health information science, and Annabelle Kwan Hase is a professor in the Faculty of Information and Media Studies. Annabelle and Vanessa, great to have you on the program today. Vanessa, let me start with you. Why did you want to study this research topic?
It originally began back when I was just surfing through Instagram at the beginning of my master's, and I found a lot of research regarding hormone health with influencers. And at that time, as a woman, you're questioning yourself, whether there potentially could be certain hormone issues that you're dealing with, or whether this is just information that's being presented to you. So from there, I dove into different topics like endometriosis, and then I finally landed on PCOS and started to look into that there.
And did you notice, Vanessa, like misinformation like coming at you online?
Based on different products that were being sold, I had suspicions that there could be misinformation, but I decided to look into it a bit more.
Annabelle, the research that you folks did, really looks into influencers trying to establish credibility. How did you measure that?
We found a theory that was really interesting, source credibility, and it just kind of shows how different dimensions are used to establishing that credibility. So we were looking at expertise, trustworthiness, and attractiveness. And we found that the theory worked really well for understanding how today, and many years later, influencers and celebrities still use the same strategies to build that connection.
Okay, I want to break those down. So Annabelle, expertise-wise, how are these influencers positioning themselves as experts?
Yeah, they start mostly by referring to their own experience with PCOS. And so their expertise is based on that very own life experience. But they also make reference to clients. So they often say, well, I've worked with over 100 clients, over 100 people are feeling better. And they refer to credentials. And, often influencers would say, I'm a PCOS dietitian, I'm a PCOS fitness coach. But it's also important that some of them provided some boundaries by saying, please, I'm a dietitian, but if you want to talk more about medical issues, refer back to your medical doctor. So there was some boundary setting as well happening in terms of that expertise.
Right. It feels like they're making up their own title sometimes because, what is a PCOS fitness coach? Let me quickly ask about trustworthiness, Annabelle. How were they, gaining trust with their audience?
Trustworthiness is the most important of these categories, and they often refer to their own lived experience, their daily experiences with PCOS. A second strategy often used was to go beyond their social media persona. So making reference to, let's say, what they're doing for Halloween, how they're interacting with their family, that created a lot of bonding.
Yeah, building rapport, is such a big part of the social media space. Vanessa, let me ask you about attractiveness. Because first of all, what does that mean? And what techniques were being used to appeal to people?
Attractiveness is actually really interesting when it comes to influencer research because it's not just the physical attractiveness of the speaker, but also how similar and likable they are to their audience. So with influencers, we found that they were trying to cultivate this sense of community that's easy to do with PCOS, because a lot of the time individuals with PCOS are looking to connect with others who have it because they feel like they've been left behind in certain ways. So you'll see a lot of PCOS influencers refer to their community as sisters or use personal language to try and draw others in.
So those are the three components, right? Expertise, trustworthiness, attractiveness. But as you were doing your research, did you find that something was missing when you were trying to put all these pieces together?
Yes, so we found a few strategies associated with the category we put together as information manipulation. So we primarily looked at things related to healthcare professional references, evidence-based references, and then we also looked towards a lack of research that was stated by influencers and vague references. So for healthcare professional references, we were looking at influencers that pointed towards naturopaths or other healthcare professionals that guided them to use a certain product or complete a certain practice, and that was what they shared with their audience.
Okay. And what else did you see out there for examples?
There was a correcting misinformation strategy that influencers used, where they actually looked towards other information that was being shared in the community and placed themselves as the expert, saying, you know, I can help you sort through fact through fiction, and this is how I will help you understand what's misinformation and what can be understood as true.
Okay, so they're positioning themselves as you know, the person to help others weed through the misinformation, even though some of their information may not actually be verifiable or correct.
Yes, exactly.
Annabelle, let me come to you because I was intrigued by this term called healthism and how that fits into this conversation. What is that?
So healthism has been around for a long time, and it's a simple idea. It's just the idea that we each are responsible for our own health. And so rather than, for example, thinking of it as more being something that institutions would do or that is a part of society, each person has their own agency in terms of becoming healthy, staying healthy, being fit. And some of it, of course, healthyism can be a good thing because it starts with maybe eating healthy, being active in daily life. But at the same time, healthism can be very problematic because it puts really the onus on the person and the responsibility on the person, rather than kind of looking more holistically at something like PCOS.
And you see a lot of that online. Do you feel, Annabelle, like that is giving people false hope?
It is giving false hope. And I think influencers tend to also use it a little bit in their favor, in particular when they're setting themselves up, as I said earlier, as experts, because they're saying, well, the medical system doesn't really understand what PCOS is. There's this gap in the research. But if you come, if you take action, if you're an agent of your own health and do what the advice that I'm providing, then you can get better quickly. And there's all this evidence, right, from my clients, from the research I've done. And so to me, that is definitely false hope.
Last word to you, Vanessa. What would you say to people consuming this content online?
I think one thing to really watch out for is how information can be sandwiched into information that we already know is true. So I find this a lot in influencer research, that sometimes true information can be used to hide what's actually misinformation. Another thing that I would recommend is to pay attention to the context that information is being presented to you in. So are they selling something? Have they pointed to the quality of the evidence that they're sharing? Things like this can really impact how you understand and apply information to your own health behaviors.
Great tips, ladies. Appreciate having you on the program. Still to come, we have a world-renowned PCOS expert on our program. But first, let's take a look at what's causing confusion in the headlines this week.
Is planet Earth growing a brand new ocean? For years, a rumor has spread on social media that a huge chunk of Africa is splitting off from the continent, making a gap that will become the world's newest ocean. It sounds crazy, but is it true? Well, kind of, but I wouldn't expect it to happen anytime soon. This part of the world, which runs through more than a dozen countries, is called the Great Rift Valley. It sits between three tectonic plates that really are separating, but very, very slowly. It took 30 million years for the valley to form, and it'll take millions more for an ocean to fill it, if it happens at all. So if you're shopping for oceanfront property in Burundi, you might have to wait a while. Are you worried about misinformation in the age of AI? If so, you're not alone. A recent survey by the Canadian Journalism Foundation found that 88% of Canadians were concerned by AI deception in the news. 3 in 5 Gen Z Canadians reported seeing fake content online at least several times a week. Now, the majority of Canadians still say they trust traditional news, but just over a quarter put their faith in content they find on social media. CJF President Natalie Turvey says that when digital deception becomes a routine part of how we get our info, we face a fundamental threat to informed citizenship. So be careful out there. Misinformation is everywhere. And finally, do you recognize this UK news anchor? Probably not. She doesn't really exist.
In a British TV first, I'm actually an AI presenter.
That so-called presenter is hosting a documentary called Will AI Take My Job?, where viewers only find out at the end that she was computer generated all along. Sorry for the spoiler.
Some of you might have guessed. I wasn't on location reporting this story. My image and voice were generated using AI.
The company behind the dog says it doesn't plan on making a habit of using AI newscasters, but that the stunt shows how disruptive AI could be. Here in Canada, a StatCan report found last year that the majority of workers are in jobs that could see major changes due to AI. For some, that could mean faster and more convenient work. Others may be out of a job. And by the way, in case you were wondering, our host, Molly Thomas, is a 100% human journalist. And that's your reality check. Now you're in the know.
Now, we're excited to have a specialist in PCOS and women's health on our program, all the way from Australia. Professor and researcher Helena Teed works at Monash University's Centre for Health Research and Implementation in Melbourne. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we've learned so much about the common claims that PCOS influencers push out there. What is it about this topic that just breeds misinformation?
Misinformation and disinformation thrives in the context of not necessarily enough knowledge or science, but often not enough listening, caring, and empathy for people who are often frustrated by the condition that they have. And this particular condition, the name is actually inaccurate, but most importantly, we've missed the opportunity to really listen to those who have the condition, understand the broad impacts it has, and in that context, they've sought advice from others and are more vulnerable in that context.
Let's unpack the name a little bit. So what is the problem and, what would you like to see changed?
Well, there are no cysts that are increased in polycystic ovary syndrome for a start, so that's a problem. Secondly, they're just follicles or eggs that develop in our ovaries and they get larger as they grow. And because of the hormonal or endocrine challenges in this condition, they just half develop and go to sleep. They're not actually cysts, they're not going to burst, they won't bleed. They literally are just sleeping eggs along the process of development. And the second thing about it is that it's a secondary ovary disease. It's not really a disease of the ovaries per se. And that really undermines the fact that because it's a hormone condition and hormones are chemical messages and go right throughout our body, there are lots of features of this condition that are then neglected. And finally, because it's called an ovary condition, it's seen to be women's business and a reproductive condition only, and therefore it's not talked about, there's limited awareness, and we really have failed to reach people about the importance and broad impact of the condition.
Wow, so even the name itself, the title, is breeding misinformation and confusion, really, in people trying to understand it. I want to ask about, you talked about people not listening to each other or listening to women that might have these symptoms. Do you sympathize then with the people that go online searching for answers that want to have somebody give them some kind of information?
We definitely sympathise with people who want some kind of information. In fact, that's where my interest in this area started, was actually listening to not just my patients, and this was one of the conditions that was least taught in medical school. It affects 170 million women around the world, 1 in 8 in the sort of adolescent to 40 age group. And yet it took 1 hour of my 6 years at medical school as a lecturer under infertility. So it's about how we reach those health professionals, but more importantly, how we empower people with the condition so they become the ones that chart their territory between their different health professionals over time. And that's what the Ask PCOS app is designed to do. It's free. We don't make any money out of it at all. It costs us an awful lot of time and money to create, but it's used in 195 countries now. And essentially it talks about what it is, what causes it, what the features can be, what the treatment options are, and then it allows people to take some of that information and specifically say to their doctor or their health professional, I now know what this is, I know it's caused by hormones, I know what they are, but I want to know what my hormone levels are and what does that mean for me? So you just get to ask those personalised questions. It dispels a lot of the myths that are out there, because that concept of being able to think about before you go to your health professional, being knowledgeable, thinking about what matters to you and what you want from your treatments and how you would grade the benefits and the side effects. You get to think about that before you go to your health professional.
Right.
And then make a shared decision about what treatments you would prefer.
Yeah, you're armed with more information and you can point them back to evidence-based research and tools that are catered to you. It's fascinating. So anyone in Canada, any woman in Canada can access that?
Yes, freely available.
Do you think that that app is enough to course correct the misinformation that's out there?
No, so we do quite a lot of work in digital health, and some of that is around improving grading of the quality of content so people know what they can trust. And many governments, including Australia, and I know Canada and UK are working in these areas as well, are looking at informing the public about what information is trustworthy and what isn't. So that's going to be a bigger body of work. But I would also say, I was looking at a survey yesterday, and this is from Australia, but one of the interesting things is that the people who are most trusted in the community are health professionals, doctors and nurses, and there's a list under that. The people who are least trusted are social influencers. But where social influencers get their gravitas and their space is where people are frustrated because they don't get enough information. They don't feel it's personalised enough. They're not getting enough back from their health professionals. So it's beholden on us to fill that gap.
What is the harm of listening to influencers talk about PCOS?
So the support communities, there's very little harm. In fact, there's probably benefit in terms of the advocacy organisations. They really make an effort to make sure their information is evidence-based so that at least you can trust the information you're getting. But you get those stories, that lived experience, that shared commonality and the understanding. So I would very much say that advocacy organisations are generally a good avenue. The problem is the social influencers who have some money to make, essentially, from their products. Now, first, do no harm. At worst, they're likely to cost you a substantial amount of money, but they almost certainly won't help because the evidence is there that they don't. However, the risk is the damage that's happening when they dissuade people from taking effective therapies. For example, for some reason, the combined oral contraceptive pill is taking an absolute shellacking in the social media. And the fact is that for this condition, the combined oral contraceptive pill is not actually just a contraceptive pill. It's a very effective hormonal treatment that directly combats the hormone disturbance that happens in this condition. So it's a hormone treatment, not just a contraceptive. But women are being dissuaded from considering effective therapies and persuaded to use ineffective ones that they're paying money for. So if it doesn't harm you and you wish to spend your money, that's an informed choice, knowing that it probably won't make any difference. It doesn't in a population level. But if it dissuades you from taking things that work, that causes harm. And that's where we become most concerned.
Keep in mind, influencers can't survive without your attention, but they're often trying to turn likes into profit. Now, for anyone living with PCOS, we have links to legitimate, evidence-based research on our website. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next Sunday or anytime online.